The deadliest part of an airborne mission wasn't always the battle. It was the jump itself. June 6th, 1944. A C-47. Dakota rattles through the night sky over Normandy. Inside, paratroopers sit shoulder to shoulder under the glow of a dim red light. Their faces are painted black, their eyes fixed on the jumpmaster by the door. The engines thunder, flak bursts outside, and every man knows this could be his last flight. Each soldier carries more than 125 pounds of gear: rifle, grenades, ammo, rations, a main parachute on his back, and a reserve strapped to his chest. The weight cuts into their shoulders, pressing them into their seats. For many, the reserve is just false comfort. They know that at such low altitudes, it may never have time to deploy. The jumpmaster calls out the ritual words, "Stand up! Hook up!" Metal clicks echo as dozens of static lines snap onto the cable, running the length of the fuselage. This cord is everything. If it works, the parachute deploys. If it fails, the soldier plummets. There's no second chance at 400 feet. The red light turns green. The door slams open, the night rushing in like a storm. One by one, men vanish into the black sky, swallowed whole. Some see their canopies bloom, a white lifeline between life and death. Others fall with nothing above them but darkness. What the history books often soften is this: before enemy bullets or artillery ever had their chance, airborne divisions were already suffering casualties. Faulty gear, static line mishaps, tangled chutes, broken bones on hard landings. These silent killers struck long before paratroopers reached their objectives. As thousands leapt into Normandy, many never fired a shot in anger. Their war ended the moment they stepped through the door, victims not of German guns, but of gravity, fire, and fate itself. This is the hidden story of airborne troops in World War II, when parachutes failed and courage met catastrophe. Airborne warfare was born from desperation and innovation. By the late 1930s, generals across the world realized that tanks and trenches had locked the battlefield into stalemate. The answer? Drop soldiers from the sky, paratroopers who could leap behind enemy lines, seize bridges, disrupt supply routes, and throw an entire army into chaos. The Germans led the way. In 1940, their paratroopers stunned the world by seizing key targets in the Low Countries and Crete. It looked like the future of war had arrived. But those early victories came at a brutal price. Hundreds of men killed before their boots ever touched the ground. Malfunctioning parachutes, heavy equipment loads, and murderous flak turned many jumps into mass graves. The Allies took note. Britain and America scrambled to build airborne divisions of their own, inspired by the boldness of the idea, but aware of the risks. Training schools sprang up, packed with volunteers who knew this was no ordinary assignment. They weren't just infantry. They were gamblers, betting their lives on cloth canopies and thin cords. Yet from the beginning, commanders understood the hidden cost. In training alone, accident rates were staggering. Broken bones, snapped necks, men crushed under their own gear. But the payoff was too great to ignore. A single battalion dropped at the right place could achieve what a whole armored division might take days to do. By early 1944, as the Allies prepared for the invasion of Europe, the risks were clear to everyone involved. But generals pressed forward anyway. The element of surprise was worth the gamble. Every man who climbed into a C-47 on the eve of D-Day knew he wasn't just fighting Germans, he was fighting the very laws of physics. Before they ever faced enemy fire, paratroopers faced the merciless reality of training. At bases across Britain and the United States, thousands of young men were pushed to master the art of falling from the sky. It started with ritual. Stand up! Hook up! The command was barked over and over until it became second nature. Soldiers practiced clipping static lines into place, slapping the harness of the man in front to confirm it was secure. Gallows humor ran rampant. One joke went, "If your chute doesn't open, bring it back. We'll give you another." Beneath the laughter, everyone knew the truth. A mistake at 500 feet left no second chances. Mock towers loomed at training fields. Men jumped from platforms, learning to land with the parachute landing fall, feet together, knees bent, body rolling to absorb the shock. Still, injuries piled up, ankles snapped, spines fractured. And sometimes the practice chutes didn't open at all. Every casualty was a brutal reminder. The sky was as dangerous as the battlefield. Fear was drilled out through repetition. Instructors shouted, shoved, and cursed, trying to build soldiers who wouldn't freeze at the door of a real plane. But no amount of drilling could erase the private dread each paratrooper carried. They learned to mask it with rituals, tapping helmets, kissing Saint. Christopher medals, joking about reserves that only worked if you prayed fast enough. By the time the men were certified, they carried more than wings on their chest. They carried an unspoken understanding. Combat jumps weren't just about bullets and bombs. The sky itself could kill you before the enemy even had a chance. June 5th, 1944. Across English airfields, the airborne divisions prepared to launch the most dangerous mission of their lives. The invasion of Normandy was hours away, and for paratroopers, survival came down to the gear on their backs and the men who packed it. Each chute was folded by riggers who worked with near-religious focus. Paratroopers trusted these unseen hands with their lives. Some kissed their parachutes before boarding, whispering a private prayer. "Please open." Every man carried two canopies, the main on his back, the reserve strapped to his chest. But deep down, they all knew the truth. From the low altitudes planned for D-Day, a reserve would likely never save them. The weight was staggering. With weapons, grenades, radios, rations, and demolition charges, men waddled under loads of 125 to 150 pounds. Some carried leg bags stuffed with extra gear, tied on with rope. More than one paratrooper joked bitterly that if the chute didn't kill him, the landing with all this weight would. Still, there was an electricity in the air. Eisenhower himself walked the lines, shaking hands, smiling, telling them they were about to embark on a crusade. Behind the cheers and salutes, the men felt the quiet pressure of fate. They were about to leap into the dark with only a silk canopy between them and death. As engines roared to life, many sat in silence. Some smoked one last cigarette. Others scribbled quick letters home. And when the jump master shouted, "Hook up!" they clipped their static lines to the cable above, each one privately whispering the same desperate hope. "Let my chute open." The night of June 6th, 1944, was supposed to unfold with military precision. Hundreds of C-47 Dakota transports carried the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions across the English Channel. Each pilot had maps, timings, and strict flight paths to drop paratroopers squarely onto their designated drop zones. But once the armada of planes crossed the French coast, order dissolved into chaos. German flak batteries lit up the sky, spewing orange fire into the darkness. Heavy anti-aircraft guns filled the air with lethal bursts, while smaller cannons ripped holes through wings and fuselages. Pilots instinctively jinked and swerved to save their aircraft. But in doing so, they threw their formations into disarray. Some transports released sticks of paratroopers far off target, others too high, some disastrously too low. Cloud banks added to the nightmare. Visibility vanished. Pilots lost their bearings. Green jump lights snapped on at the wrong time, sending men tumbling into fields miles from their objectives. For some, the nightmare was even worse. Planes exploded mid-air, fireballs tearing across the sky as loaded paratroopers perished before even touching ground. One veteran remembered the terrifying moment his plane lurched violently from flak. Men inside slammed into the fuselage walls, gear scattering. The green light flicked on, and with no time to argue, they leapt into the void. We were nowhere near the drop zone, he recalled. I landed alone in a swamp, with tracer fire all around me. In those crucial minutes, the first casualties of the invasion weren't from firefights in hedgerows. They were men lost in the sky itself, killed by fire, confusion, and physics before they ever had a chance to fight. For many airborne troops, survival didn't come down to enemy bullets. It came down to altitude. Standard training jumps were made from 800 feet, giving enough time for a canopy to inflate and, if needed, for a reserve chute to deploy. But on D-Day, many planes flew as low as 300 to 400 feet to avoid flak. At those heights, paratroopers barely had time for their chutes to open, let alone to fix malfunctions. One paratrooper later described it as getting 1.5 swings under the canopy before hitting the ground. For some, the chute never fully inflated, just a limp streamer of silk fluttering uselessly as the ground rushed up at lethal speed. Reserves strapped to their chests were effectively worthless. There simply wasn't enough time to pull, deploy, and catch air. Even when the chute worked, landings were brutal. Weighted down with over 100 pounds of gear, men slammed into hedgerows, stone walls, and farm roads with bone-snapping force. Broken ankles and twisted knees were common. Some men were knocked unconscious on impact and never woke up. Others found themselves too injured to fight, crawling through fields just trying to regroup. Worse still, some pilots, flying too fast under fire, dropped their sticks at speeds well above training norms. At higher speeds, parachutes opened violently, jerking bodies so hard that risers cut into necks or dislocated shoulders. Then, instead of drifting down gently, men were whipped around like rag dolls before crashing into the French countryside. The cruel truth was that many airborne soldiers never even fired their rifles. For them, the war ended the moment they stepped out of the aircraft, killed not by German guns, but by altitude, speed, and the merciless laws of gravity. Among paratroopers, there was one shared nightmare: the canopy that never opened. Training hammered home the possibility of malfunctions, static lines that didn't pull, chutes that tangled into streamers, or risers that twisted into hopeless knots. On D-Day, those nightmares became reality. Some men leapt into the dark only to feel nothing. No tug, no blossoming canopy above, just a sickening freefall with seconds to live. Others watched in horror as nearby jumpers' chutes streamed behind them like useless ribbons, bodies vanishing into the blackness below. Then there was the terror of the towed jumper. If a static line tangled or failed to release, a paratrooper could be dragged behind the aircraft, smashing against its fuselage or dangling helplessly until the line snapped or the plane's crew cut him loose. Survival in such cases was rare. Even when the chute opened, things could still go wrong. Lines could wrap around a jumper's legs or arms, leaving him spinning violently. Equipment bags sometimes ripped free and yanked men off balance mid-descent. One veteran recalled watching his best friend leap, only to see his canopy collapse instantly. There was nothing anyone could do, he said years later. He was just gone. To cope, troopers relied on rituals and superstitions. Some patted their chutes before boarding. Others whispered prayers. Dark humor was a shield. Jokes about bringing your chute back if it doesn't work masked the gut-deep fear every man carried. Because when parachutes failed, there was no second chance. And everyone in those planes knew it. If the sky didn't kill you, the ground often tried. For many paratroopers on D-Day, survival wasn't decided by German bullets, but by where they landed. And in Normandy, the landscape itself became a battlefield. German defenders had flooded entire fields to create hidden lakes. In the dark, weighted down with rifles, grenades, and 100 pounds of gear, paratroopers dropped straight into water they couldn't see. Some never resurfaced. Others fought desperately to unclip harnesses, cutting themselves free as the heavy loads dragged them under. Those who made it out of the ponds often emerged cold, soaked, and alone, their equipment lost the depths. Trees were no safer. Normandy was full of orchards and church steeples, and paratroopers dangled helplessly from branches, exposed to enemy fire. Some were shot where they hung. Others fell trying to cut themselves loose. There's a haunting story of one American whose chute snagged on a church tower in Saint-Mère-Église. He survived by playing dead as German troops passed below, bullets whizzing past his swaying body. Then there were the glider troops, men who didn't jump, but crash-landed in wooden aircraft packed with jeeps and supplies. Many gliders slammed into Rommel's asparagus, fields of wooden stakes designed to tear the fragile planes apart. Survivors stumbled from shattered wrecks with broken bones and burns, their mission just beginning. By dawn, the French countryside told a grim tale. White silk canopies dotted trees, ponds and fields, some attached to living men, others to bodies hanging limp. For many, the fight ended before they ever drew their weapon. The drop zones became graveyards, silent reminders of how fragile survival was in the airborne gamble. For those who made it through the chaos of the jump, the battle wasn't just against German troops. It was against the images seared into their memories. Men staggered through hedgerows and villages, passing the bodies of friends whose chutes never opened or whose gear dragged them into flooded marshes. Some fought through their missions with grim determination, but inside they carried questions that would echo for decades. Why did I live when he didn't? Survivor's guilt weighed heavily on airborne veterans. Many admitted years later that the worst memories weren't firefights, but the sight of empty harnesses, unopened chutes, and comrades who never even reached the ground alive. They joked darkly in the moment. Songs, gallows humor, and camaraderie helped dull the fear. But at reunions decades later, those jokes often gave way to tears. One paratrooper confessed that every time he heard the snap of a flag in the wind, it reminded him of parachutes ripping open or failing to. Another said he never forgot the faces of men still dangling in trees at dawn, silent and still. For many, these memories stayed buried until old age, when veterans finally spoke about what haunted them. We were supposed to be the lucky ones, one recalled, but you carry the unlucky with you, too. The silent killers of malfunction, altitude, and terrain didn't just take lives. They left scars in the men who survived. In the end, despite the chaos and staggering losses, the airborne mission on D-Day worked. Scattered and battered, paratroopers still seized bridges, blocked German reinforcements, and sowed confusion behind enemy lines. Their sacrifice made the beach landings possible, but the lessons were written in blood. After the war, airborne forces around the world studied those drops. They redesigned parachutes with stronger canopies and safer harnesses. They developed automatic reserve devices that could deploy if a soldier was unconscious or too low. Training became stricter, with better jump master procedures to reduce accidents. Altitudes for combat jumps were adjusted to balance survivability with tactical surprise. Each improvement was meant to make sure fewer men died before their boots touched the ground. Today, commemorative jumps over Normandy honor not only those killed in combat, but also those claimed by faulty gear, dark water, and bad luck. Veterans stand in those same fields, watching modern paratroopers drift safely down, and remember the friends who never had the chance. Because the legacy of D-Day's Airborne isn't just about victory. It's about the hidden cost, the silent killers that claimed lives without warning, and the courage of men who leapt anyway, knowing that even before the first shot was fired, death could be waiting in the sky, in the ground, or in the folds of silk meant to save them.